That's exactly what my husband
meeting is being recorded.
Oops.
We're getting recorded.
We're getting recorded there.
This week's Torah portion is Parshat Shemot. Very, very important Torah portion. If nothing else, it opens up the book of Exodus, or the book of Shemot, right, as we call it in Jewish tradition. And in it, we talk, and this is the lion's share of the Jewish people's slavery in Egypt is in this week's Torah portion. Parshat Va'era is already, next week's Torah portion is already, in a sense, deep into the salvation measures, right? Moshe is already on the job, as it were, in confronting Pharaoh, let my people go, and all the plagues and the miracles, etc. But this week's parsha is entirely the drama of the Jewish people's slavery. And it is a profile in humanity, in the worst of humanity, the best of humanity, etc. We are introduced to many different archetypes in this parsha. Each one of us teaches us a very important lesson. First of all, you have the first irrational hater in this week's Torah portion. The first anti-Semite, as it were. Now, we've talked about this. You could say there was others, that whatever it is, Esav, Lavan.
It was a
Ishmael.
good conversation.
Right.
Remember, my guess was Abraham's father initially.
Terah.
Right. Yes. And all these, but you see, all of them, one can make an argument, had a basis to their angst or antagonism, etc. What we see here in this week's parsha, and the words back it up, is a disposition towards a nation, in this case the Jewish people, for no valid reason whatsoever.
Wait a minute.
Mhm.
What about the fact that they were multiplying all over the place,
Very
which
good.
meant that they were displacing Egyptians?
No, they were displacing nobody. They were in the land of Goshen. They were not displacing. What Pharaoh said, right? They had a burgeoning population among them, right? The Jewish people, a burgeoning population. Something to take note of, no doubt. And the Torah does not shy away from making that point, right? Bnei Israel, haru vayishritzu vayirbu vayatzmu b'ma'od ma'od, right? The Torah again does not embellish. The Torah does not engage in Shakespearean fluff, right? So all these various adjectives, right? Haru vayishritzu, I don't know, not adjectives. I guess adverbs, right?
Synonyms.
What? But I'm saying what types of synonyms? Color. I think adverb. They they were many and fruitful and multiplied and teamed and grew in greater and greater measure, right?
It says me'od me'od.
Right. This is exact, as the Talmud clarifies for us. Because count how many synonyms there were given. Bnei Israel paru, vayishritzu, vayirbu, vayatzmu, b'me'od me'od. Okay? 6. Talmud says that every pregnancy was sextuplets.
Right.
And if you say, wow, that seems to be just like, the Medrash or the Talmud just like, there can't be any, that's myth. No, because in the span of three generations, right, from the original walkers in to the land of Egypt to the walkers out was really 3 generations, right? Let's do it this way. 70, right? 70 went down to Egypt, right? 70 included Yaakov's grandchildren, okay? So the grandchildren of Yaakov are walking in. So Levi, let's just take the tribe of Levi, right? So Levi, not just Levi, but Levi's kids, right? Which we know are three: Gershon, Kahat, and Merari, right? Gershon, Kahat, and Merari are the three children of Levi, and those become the primary families, right? The Kahatis, the Meraris, the Gershunis. Later, when they divide up the jobs the Levites had to do, these were the three families. Okay,
Gotcha.
so that's the layer that walks into the land of Israel, the land of Egypt. So Gershon, Kahat, and Merari walk in. Okay, so that layer of the of genealogy has 70. Okay, now
Right.
Kehat has four children: Amram, Yitzhar, Hebron, and Uziel. Okay, and Amram's kids. So that's one layer down. That's the first layer of Egypt. Okay, so now we're in the second generation of Egyptians, of Jews in Egypt, right? Who was Amram's kids? Moshe, Aaron, and
Moshe,
Miriam.
Moshe, right,
So three generations total. Three generations total. Okay, we
right.
go from a 70 total population, and in three generations later, what is the population up to? In other words, the
A lot.
grandchildren of those 70, how many grandchildren do those 70 have? Not the children, the grandchildren, not the great-grandchildren, grandchildren.
A lot. It's a big
Over
number.
close to 2 million.
And this
Because we
wouldn't
know
be, if
this.
you were an Egyptian, this wouldn't make you a little nervous?
The
right.
demographic arguments.
1 minute. So point by point. So
All right.
first steps first. So that those 6 children at a time sounds a lot more likely, right? Because otherwise the calculus doesn't really add up. Yes, Carrie.
Right.
How many Egyptians were there, do you think? Do they know? Still, or
Oh, I see what she's asking. That's a good question. Percentage-wise, what was it?
we can't hear you, Rabbi.
He's on the phone.
I think he's on the phone.
He's using his phone call for what's that show where you get the
Maybe
phone
this
call?
is why there are many Americans who are worried about immigration and all these people coming in who are Hispanic for the most part, and they're worried about them reproducing at great rates, and where their percentage of the population will get to a point where they're overwhelmed.
That was the whole point, Les.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying maybe there are Americans thinking that today, not only
Correct.
not only overwhelming the people who are here, but also needing services and welfare and such. So, just a little side point.
And also not vetted correctly. I mean, we could go on about this.
I mean, they're illegally coming in, right? That's a problem.
But we won't, because this is such a great country that we can definitely take care of all of these people coming in.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay, does everybody hear me?
Okay. Now we do. Now we do.
Okay. I was wondering. I'm like, wait. I'm gonna say, Les, such a great point, but let's back up a bit. And then the conversation is just bulldozing me over. I'm wondering what's going on here. Then I realized that I'm
We
hearing
couldn't
you,
hear
but
you.
you don't hear me. Okay. Les, your point is a very good point, and we're going to actually address it in this context as well. But because yes, burgeoning populations, and we start looking at the way we are in a sense responding to a burgeoning population. But first, so we make the point of burgeoning population. I don't believe, Carrie, to your point, in terms of the size of the population, Egyptians had to be significantly more, or else the easier task would just be for the Jewish people to rebel and walk themselves out. Having said that, so what's the very next words that it says? That the Egyptians, it says that after the Jewish people are growing in their midst, right? There's an end to that verse or rather the beginning of the next verse, right? And the world and the land, so they go vayishru vayirbu vayatzmu ma'od ma'od, and the next verse starts with the words vayakutsu, and it says the Egyptians become not afraid of them, which okay, that would be the rest, or intimidated, or concerned. That would be all fear. Right? Not fear as in FAIR, fear. It would be a fair thing to say, okay, become concerned. There is a variable and whatever it is, and we have to be concerned. Our address, have a plan, whatever. And to your point, to a certain degree, the United States is a nation of immigrants, and it's not it's fair to be concerned. Like, we have this new, and it's whatever it is, and to Carrie's point, when they're showing a disregard to our laws and our processes, that's something that's but that's not the word it says about them. That's not the word that the Egyptians had. It says bayakutsu. They were disgusted.
Oh,
Bayakutsu. Which then leads Pharaoh to play on their, what's it called, on already their negative, and says, we have to do hava nischak malo. We have to plot against these people. Have to nischakma. We have to, use our head and come up with a plan, a plot. Why? Because Penyir, maybe there'll become too many. V'haya ki tikrena milchama. When that if ever we could go to war against some other nation, v'nosafgam hu al sonenu, they will join our enemy.
Right.
And they will kick us out of our own land. Now, at what point, what indication did the Jewish people give to the Egyptians that they were in any way unpatriotic and would side with their enemies?
None whatsoever, and that less is the difference.
Not exactly.
One minute.
Exactly.
One minute. None whatsoever. Not only that, at the same time that Pharaoh manages to convince the nation that they're a threat because of their lack of patriotism, how do they do them in? How do they do the Jewish people in?
With work.
Utilizing their innate patriotism. The way they pull the people in is by saying, let's begin this national building project. And who do they know would be the first ones to sign up in gratitude for their host nation? It was going to be the Jews. And they also knew, as the rest of them were slipping out, who were going to be the last ones that would stay on the job? The Jews, because that's how they did it. They did it as a national project, and slowly but surely the Egyptians back out until it was only the Jews, and that kind of set itself into the paradigm where the Jews work and everybody else doesn't. And it was all, this was the plan. This was Pharaoh's plot. So they know the Jews are intrinsically patriotic and showing gratitude to the nation, and that's what they're using to get them in. So by what rationale are they concerned that the Jews would be unpatriotic enough to actually side with their enemies? No rationale whatsoever other than the pure disgust and antagonism to the people. That's why it's anti-Semitism and it's hate. It's not just concern, because it was just concern to say, okay, we have to monitor, we have to whatever it is, we have to figure out how this is going to work. But the idea that it said they became disgusted, then it created the straw man. And so, they're going to be our enemies. They're going to side with our enemies. At the same time that they realize that that the Jewish people are so patriotic that the way we're going to reel them in is to play on their patriotism means that you're dealing with not rational concern, but irrational hatred. Okay, Carrie first, and then Les. Go ahead, Carrie.
I mean, obviously, I guess the whole thing was irrational, but like, is there any thought on like where the disgust came from, or like, do we know anything about that?
That's the $1 million eternal question. And I think that's the
Or is
that
it just meant
is
to be like Hashem wanted that for us because we
I
have
was,
Halacha
this
I
Psuka.
was guessing that
Process.
maybe because they insisted on keeping their clothing and their language and their religion and all, and they wouldn't
except
assimilate.
except that we see in Western Europe that their
Oh, that's true, the
animosity was
assimilating.
because we were assimilating. And in
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, it was because we weren't assimilating. And
Right.
in America, it's because we were the communists. And in Russia and places else, because we are the capitalists.
Capitalists.
Well,
Is it
whoever the
just part of our
boogeyman is, the Jewish people are the boogeyman. That Jonathan Sachs talks about this at length, and that's the point. That's why it's the $1 million question. The answer is there is absolutely, and that's why we can call it anti-Semitism, why we can call it hate. Otherwise, you say, hey, maybe it's just fear concern. Maybe it's fear-minded concern. You can't. Not every time people are concerned about something is it irrational hatred. It's not necessarily a phobia. If people are concerned about something, it's not a phobia to say that when somebody is sneezing all over the place that you're going to stay away from them, right? It's not a phobia. It's called being, rationally attentive
Right.
to potential threats. But
They say just
here
because you're
itself,
paranoid doesn't mean people aren't against you.
right. But don't say that too
Right,
loud because they're listening. But either way, the point is that's why the Torah goes out of its way to tell you that this was vayakutsu. This started with a disgust and a hate versus a rational concern. Because then it didn't make a difference what the Jewish people did. And look, the Jewish people are being obedient. They're being slaves. They're working on, and to do what? To build cities on quicksand. There was no goal in mind other than to drive these people into the dirt. Go ahead, Les.
I was going to say that the disgust may have come from one place, and that is that the Hebrews were shepherds and they ate the Egyptians' god. And remember, at the very first, when Joseph introduces his family to Pharaoh, he's trying, he's worried a little bit about introducing them because they are killing their gods and eating them.
Right.
And that was disgusting. That was disgusting to the Egyptians.
What was the god?
consultant.
The lambs. We know later
Lamb.
that this is one of the reasons that the we call it Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Shabbos, because right before they leave Egypt, because God gives them a significant test, right? Go take the lambs, take them into your house 4 days early, so that it's going to be clear and apparent to every single Egyptian what you're doing. And you're going to face these people who have been your overlords for 210 years. And in this incredible act of trust in God and defiance to your overlords, you're going to tell that we're taking your God and we're going to slaughter your God to our God. All this to say that this is, as we say, that this was something that it was a deity to the Egyptians, which is why, as Les mentioned, that when Yosef brings his brothers, he says, go tell Pharaoh, right, that when he asks you what your job is, you'll tell him that we're shepherds. That way, he will send you off to the land of Goshen, right? To go shepherds and not intermingle among the people, but he'll give you a thing. Now, that's exactly why Goshen is the remedy. The Egyptians know that any other culture outside of their own raise and cultivate sheep, right? And just because and we know that there's many cultures that sit there and enjoy a bacon sandwich, right? Yeah, we don't hate them and discuss and want to persecute them, right? Just and things like this. The Jewish people are going and they're doing their thing in Goshen. That's exactly why, it's like go do it in Goshen. If that's your thing, go do it in Goshen, because it doesn't work in our culture, and fine, no problem, go do it in Goshen. But the point is, Les, that as we have seen throughout history, there isn't any one particular thing that the Jewish people do. Again, say, oh, well, I've heard lately people saying, and trying to understand right now why this incredible hate from the progressive left clearly against the Jewish people. And it's not just against Israel, it's against the Jewish people. As we all know this. Globalize the Intifada and all that, etc. And so people have heard a very cogent, and it's an argument that definitely seems to have some merit, is that it's because the Jews are the successful minority, and the whole concept of the left is that minorities have to constantly be tended to and taken care of, and the Jews have the temerity of being the minority that succeeds, and then that.
But the Asians also.
Right, and they'll draw the comparison to the Asians. Also, why the Asians are, and Harvard are also discriminated against, and yada yada yada. And the thing is like that. Yeah, that works until you go back to the shtetl, where the Jewish people were being persecuted for being unsuccessful and being vermin. And, well, that's also because you kept them down, but they were being persecuted for it. There's never going to be a specific reason that's going to say, that's what it is. What it is because that's the way God has decided. This is what God told Abraham way before Abraham ever didn't do any sin or whatever it is. It says your children will be slaves for 400 years. This is
so God wants us to be persecuted and outraged about it. That's what he wants for his people.
What does he want for the Jew? I don't say he wants us to be persecuted. If for whatever reason that's in the cards, there's things that we do that we don't want but are necessary, right? I don't want to eat healthy. I would love to eat burgers all day, right? Now you happen to know my personal.
So you can go on carnivore.
Yes, no, but my point is, it's not. I don't know if it's fair to say that God. Want, you have to be, it depends what the connotation of want. I don't think that God is saying that he prefers that the Jewish people be slaves. Is it part of his plan that the Jewish people be slaves or be hated, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, clearly.
But he wants us to be outraged about it. He wants us to fight against.
Definitely not outraged, and also not. He wants us to be moved to do something about it.
Oh, Rabbi.
Right? It's our destiny.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, Carrie, go ahead.
So I mean, all of all of it's just an excuse every time we get kicked out of a country, every time there's anti-Semitism, every time is just these silly excuses. You're too religious, you're not religious, you're too integrated, you're too this, you're too that. It's always some excuse. You got too rich and now, the coffers of Spain are too empty or whatever. It's always some excuse. And it's all garbage. I mean, that's not it. It's God, Hashem wants this for us to grow. It's part of our journey. It's like Yosef. It's like something came of it that created an evolution of the Jewish people.
Right.
I mean, could it be that? I'm asking. I stated that as a
right.
statement.
I would say like this. I think the answer is that does provide an answer to a point. In other words, that it's been a net benefit to us, right? Is a little bit of what you're saying, that it has made us stronger, it has brought us together, it has.
How can we say it's been a net benefit? What about the Holocaust?
So that's what I said. That's what I said. It's an answer to a point, up until a point. At a certain point, it doesn't answer. It doesn't answer a little child who doesn't get a chance at life because they were immediately gassed in a gas chamber. It's not, to them. It hasn't been a net benefit.
But some of the greatest minds in the Jewish world lost their lives.
So here's my answer to you: stop looking for an answer to that question, and start focusing on what I'm supposed to do with the circumstance.
That's what I meant by outrage. We're supposed to be outraged. We're supposed to fight against.
So I said I would push back slightly on the word outrage because just of the negative connotation that has, but we should definitely be moved to do. Of course, no, I'm not disagreeing that we should never be mapsut about it. But there's a difference between rage and determined response. And we shouldn't lose, if outrage indicates losing ourselves to the emotion, then not outrage. Should we absolutely not accept it? 100%. We don't accept it. We push back as hard as we can, and we never fall into despair, and we never fall into ambivalence, etc. But to a certain degree, we shouldn't be ambivalent about anything in our lives, and we shouldn't just be good or bad. Everything should be a catalyst to us because we are a people on the move. That's the way God said us from the very beginning. Lech lecha. And I want to actually just to bring this back a little bit to this moment. And something I've talked about. You heard, but I think again it ties to this point. Let's look at Moshe. So we talked about Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the archetype. We talk about profiles, right? We have one profile so far. Profile of Pharaoh, as he also personifies the Egyptian, the quintessential anti-Semite, who looks at a Jew because they're disgust, because they have this hatred, that spurs all the rest of the irrational emotions. Suspicion, right? Threat, etc. And therefore rationalizes in their mind, but only in their mind, the various responses, heinous responses, and actions they take against the Jewish people. So we have there, boom, we are introduced to the anti-Semite in this parsha. We are then also introduced to a lot of other people, but we only have 5 minutes left, so maybe we'll have to tilt this into the next two other. We're introduced to the big picture thinker in this parsha. Who is that? Starts with a mem.
Moshe.
Miriam.
Interesting.
Oh, Miriam, absolutely.
Miriam is a bigger picture thinker than even Moshe is, than even her father Amram is. Right? In multiple ways, Miriam Hanaviyah, right? The Torah tells us she's Miriam Hanaviyah. Because once the Egyptians decree that all the boys should be thrown into the Nile because Pharaoh's stargazers tell him that a Jewish boy will be born who will be the savior of the people and the downfall of Egypt, and his end will come by water, right? This is what they're seeing in the stars. Pharaoh issues a decree, all the boys thrown into the Nile River.
Yeah.
So the Jewish leader at the time is who?
Moses.
Amram. Moshe is not born yet.
Oh, yeah.
Amram is the Jewish leader.
Right. He
And
doesn't want to have
Amram
babies.
says, I can't in good conscience
Have babies.
advocate that we should have, that the Jewish people is to have a single other child.
Right.
Okay, so, and then he got
Because there's
divorced.
a 50% chance that we are signing the death sentence of our own children. And
Right.
he led by example and divorced his wife.
Right.
Yocheved.
He divorced Yocheved. And you say, wait a minute, this is all midrash. This can't be, where's this in the text? Oh, very obviously in the text. Why? Because it then later says that a fellow from the house of Levi took a woman from the house of Levi and they had a child. And somehow, which is a marriage, basically, they got married and they had a child. And who is this child? The third of their children. So what? Right? If they got married and had a child, that would be the first of their children. But it's the third of their children. What happens, what the Talmud is clarifying, is what happened here was that Amram and his wife separated. They already had 2 children at that point, Aaron and Miriam, or Miriam and Aaron. It's not always clear which one is commentators say who's the older of the 2. But either way, Aaron and Miriam. But then comes the decree, because obviously it had to come in the vicinity of the birth of Moshe, because that's what the stargazers are saying, that we're seeing that imminently this child will be born. They issued the decree, and Amram then separates from Yocheved to lead by example. At which point, his daughter Miriam, this really young woman, comes to her father and says, "You're worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh only decreed because on the men, on the boys. You have now decreed on that there will not be a Jewish boy or a Jewish girl. There will not be any offspring. You will be more directly the cause of the ending of the Jewish people than even Pharaoh. And where is your trust in God? And she says, I had a prophecy that the salvation will come as long as we push and we persevere, right? And so her words fall very powerfully, impactfully on her father's ears, and he remarries Yocheved and then has a baby. And salvation doesn't begin. In fact, the opposite, right? They have to hide the baby, then push it in the water. And her father turns to her and says, where's your prophecy now, Miriam? And so Miriam, it says, that's why Miriam was following this thing to see what will become of him. Because to a certain degree, this was her prophecy. This was her responsibility almost. And she had to see what was going to happen. And Miriam stays always. Miriam is the one who tells the women that when we're going to leave Egypt, we have to leave with what?
The instruments,
Not just food and supplies. What do we need to leave with?
instrument.
We need to leave with musical instruments. Because
It
there will be,
competes
you think
with the
God's just
Ola.
going to bring us a salvation in this moment? And we're going to have to sing praises to God. So while the men were left empty-handed when the splitting of the sea and having to sing the song and all they had with their voices, Miriam was able to whip out all the musical instruments because she's the big thinker. She's the Neviah, Miriam Hanaviah. The Torah never says Moshe Hanavi. It does say Velo Kam Navi Od V'Yisrael Kemoshe later. But Miriam Hanaviah is the only one that the Torah calls a prophet. The only one the Torah ever calls a prophet is Miriam. Miriam Hanaviah. And Nevuah,
No,
the word
there's no
Navi,
other prophet.
no, the Torah doesn't label anybody. Of course, there's many prophets. But the Torah never says, in the Torah says Eldad and Medad were prophesying in, but it doesn't say Eldad and Medad Hanaviim. And it doesn't say Moshe Hanavi or Aaron Hanavi. The only one that the Torah says Hanavi about is Miriam, period.
I know in the Haftorah, Deborah is called
Oh,
a
sure.
prophetess.
Eliyahu Hanavi, Shmuel Hanavi, and Natan Hanavi. In scripture, plenty of
Miriam
times.
and yeah.
But here in the Torah, it only says Miriam. Yes. Okay, now quickly, the profiles of two more people.
Yep.
Then we have Moshe. Moshe, the profile is a profile in courage. Why a profile in courage? Because Moshe goes, right, he's living this cushy life as the prince of a palace, right? He knows he's a Jew, but he's the Jew that got out. He got out. Lucky him, right? He's the privileged one. But when he gets old enough, what does it say? That he left the palace and he went among his brothers, right? He went to go see his brothers in their suffering. And we know, and when he went and he saw, what did he see? He saw the Egyptian beating the Jew. And what does he do? He mixes in. He gets involved, right? Moshe gets involved. Then what does he see? Then he sees the next day 2 Jews.
Right.
And he gets involved again. It's none of your business. Stay out. Mix out. Right? No, Moshe doesn't do this. Right? And it costs him, right? His life is now in danger because he mixed in. Right? What happens? What happens? One of those 2 Jews goes and tattles on him to Pharaoh, right? And Pharaoh then chases him out, whatever it is, he barely makes it out with his life. And he goes to the land of Midian. There he meets his wife. Look, he's tried, right? Nobody could make an argument that he didn't try. He tried, right? He tried to make life better for his brethren, and his own brethren, right? Threw him under the bus, right?
Is this the first example of Jews like doing anti-Semitic things?
Yeah, I mean these are the troublemakers. This is Nadav and Avihu, right? The Jewish malcontents. I wouldn't necessarily call them Jewish anti-Semites, but definitely Jewish malcontents, right? And rebels. Anyways, and they're going to keep. They're always going to be at the thick of it all the way through.
Always.
Is it like
Yeah.
Sinas Chinam?
What?
Like
Yeah,
Sinas
I think
Chinam?
Sinat Chinam is fair. Yeah, I would say Sinat Chinam. But I mean all the way through, they end up being alongside Korach, also in his rebellion. But either way, so now Moshe is exiled from his home. He's no longer prince of Egypt. He's no longer a brother to the persecuted people. He's out there in Midian, but he's made a life for himself, right? He's found a beautiful wife, a loving wife, and a father-in-law who likes him, right? And respects him and only gives him advice some of the times, right? It's life is good, peaceful. He's shepherding and he's fallen in love with his flock and he's doing a good job. And then what? And always take the time to pay attention to the first time that God reveals himself to one of the greats, because there's always a lot to learn there, right? The first thing with Adam was Ayeka, right?
Yep.
Right? Adam was, and there's so much to learn from that. Where are you? Right?
Where are
The
you?
first thing to Avram was Lech Lecha, right? And so much to learn from that Lech Lecha. And the first thing to Moshe was what? Was the burning bush.
Right.
Moshe is holding this little sheep that ran away, and he's bringing the sheep back, right? And God puts a burning bush. Where does he put the burning bush?
Right in front of him.
No,
Right,
not
thank
right
you
in
for
front of him.
Thank you for teeing that one up, Les. Off on the side. How do we know it's off on the side? Because here
He had to
is
turn
the way.
and look.
Very good. This is the way the verse says it. And tell me that the verse is not trying to drive something home. Here's how the verse says. And Moshe said, let me turn and see this interesting sight. So Moshe turned to see this interesting sight. And God saw that Moshe turned to see this interesting sight. I think we got it. Moshe turned to see it. Like we could have said it once. Moshe said, let me go turn to see. Or we could just say, Moshe turned to see this interesting sight, and God spoke to him. Voila! That's all we need to say. What is this thing? Hashem was testing Moshe in the same way he tests each and every one of us, by giving us free will. Even when the moment comes calling, God says, it's still your choice. You don't think Moshe understands that when this wonder is happening, this bush is burning, etc., that there's gonna be something. This is not a natural occurrence, and there's no one else around that's supposed to be taking this in except him. His phone is ringing, okay? And he knows God's on the other line, and God still gives him an out, right? God still tells him, puts it off to the side, to which Moshe can do a lot. Like a lot of, I can't go look at it right now. I'm carrying this poor little sheep. I've got to bring it home. I don't have the time right now. And Moshe turns to see, and God sees that Moshe turns to see and says, you're the man. You're not the kind of guy who turns away from his responsibilities. You're the guy who turns towards his responsibilities. And when the moment comes calling, and you know it's going to come with responsibility, and Moshe's life is never going to be his own from this moment on. This was his last private moment till the day of his death. Moshe doesn't get a private moment again. He doesn't even get to be with his wife really again. He doesn't get to just be a homemaker, somebody, all because he turned to look at the burning bush. And had he not, could have gone away. He could have said, not my problem. And Moshe teaches us a very important life, a profile in courage. When the moment comes calling, the rendezvous with destiny, pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Have the strength and the courage to pick up the phone.
You're saying that Moshe knew that this was his moment of destiny?
I think, yes, that's what the Torah is saying. That he didn't know what it was. He didn't know what it was.
Right.
What the destiny would be. But he understood that this sight this supernatural sight with no one else around is meant to be seen by who?
Me alone.
By me, which means that there's a message here. There's something, and he turned toward it instead of turning away from it. He was very comfortable. Life was good and easy, right? And he had every excuse to say, this is it. I tried to help. I tried to be a person, whatever it is. But now, this is what's left for me. Rather, he turned toward his destiny. He knew that whatever he was doing clearly was not going to be enough, or else the bush wouldn't be burning. It's burning because something is going to be telling him to do something different than he's doing right now. There's a message from God. If your phone rings and on the phone the caller ID says God, are you going to assume, oh yeah, God is probably just going to be here to shoot the breeze or just to tell me, attaboy, carry on with what you're doing, or is there probably going to be some mission on the other end of this? God's calling for a reason, and Moshe says, "Let me pick up the phone." That takes, again, it sounds like it shouldn't take, but how many times do we see people going through life, know that there's something? You want to hear something very fascinating? This is I saw this in a book of psychology. A very, very fascinating thing. If somebody's drowning in a river and they look desperately to the shore for help, do they hope that there's going to be two people on the shore or one person on the shore?
Oh, interesting.
One.
The answer is one person.
Yeah, because they're two, they'll
One.
talk.
Because the
themselves out of it.
natural tendency of people is to say, let this be somebody
One.
else's problem.
Yeah,
Let this be somebody else's problem. And if there's two people on the shore, statistically, this person will be helped less.
right. So that's why Moses was alone then.
But the point is, because you have a tendency, but Moshe, but the bush was still off to the side. Moshe could have still walked away from it, and that was the point. God says, "I'm giving you the out. I'm giving you the choice. Are you going to turn towards, or are you going to turn away?" And the last thing I want to talk about, the last profile here, is a profile in true humility and forbearance. And who's that? That's Aaron. What does Moshe say to God? Send,
I can't
right?
do it
Shlach
alone.
no biyad tishlach. Send this in the hands of the one you already sent. Why? Because Moshe knows he's not the eldest brother, and he hasn't even been on the scene. He's going to come in, parachute in as a great savior. Aaron's been in the trenches this whole time. Well, he's been off, first living in a palace, then spending 2 days in the trenches, right? A grand total of 2 days. 1 day with the Egyptian, the second day with the thing, and then he had to run and hightail it to Midian, where he then lived this nice, simple life as a shepherd. All of a sudden, he's coming back. Ha! I'm your savior, right? Moshe turns around and says, first of all, how are the people going to take it? But more importantly, how is Aaron going to take it? My older brother, who's been the people's leader all this time, through the thick and thin, inherited it from from our father Amram. He's the one who's been on scene. He's the one who's been there in the trenches and sweat and toil and bled with the people. And I'm gonna parachute in right now and be the great savior. And so, out of respect to his older brother, in a sense. So, what's the very next words after that? God tells him, "Go down. The Aaron Achicha, your brother Aaron, is going to come out to greet you on your way in with a complete heart." In Yiddish, we call this fargin. Fargin means to be able to truly take joy and pride when somebody else gets the prize.
Remember I sent you an article about that again, which is the opposite of, what's that word in German? The,
Schadenfreude.
what's it called when you?
Schadenfreude.
Yeah. Right, Schadenfreude,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. This is Gutzefreude, I guess. I don't know. Shad in Yiddish means when it's bad.
Yeah, there was a beautiful article about how we have
joy in
that
somebody
word.
else's suffering. So I don't know if the Germans wouldn't know how to create a word that depicts the opposite, but taking true joy in somebody else's happiness and
But
success,
we have the
and
word.
not that attitude.
Yeah.
not that attitude. I heard somebody say, "What does it mean to love somebody as much as you love yourself?" You want to here's the exercise. You ready? The thought exercise. Say when you get the phone call, and you hear, "Hi, is this Mr. Goldstein?" Yeah, yes. Hi, you just won the lottery, $1 million. Really? Right? Then they call back a minute later. Oh, I'm sorry. We meant your brother. Yeah. Is the love on that same level? Is the joy rather on the same level? Aaron is being told that Moshe is going to come in. He's going to take over. He's going to be. And Aaron comes to greet his brother with love and joy. Aaron is that's Fargin. That's also an incredibly important and very special character trait. All right, everybody, I must go. But
Thank
wishing
you, Rabbi.
everybody a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos.
Have a
we
great
will pick-
Shabbos, everybody.
Yes.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
All too. Shabbat shalom.
Good shot.